Welcome back to Unit 3. We're doing quadratic relations, and our big learning goals for this unit are to interpret and solve questions related to quadratic relations. And I know I've met my learning goals if I can use problem-solving skills to create and solve an equation that involves binomial expressions and extend that to trinomial expressions. At this point, we should be able to answer these questions here. This is evidence of your learning. And this one here, you need a few more skills before we can get to solving that. And what we learned today will help you towards that, but ultimately not get you there 100%. Just a quick look back at what we learned in the last lesson, which was focused on factoring. Quite simply, that going this direction, oh, that's not what I want, going this direction is expanding, and going this direction is factoring. So when we start with a trinomial, we go back towards these brackets, that's factoring, and this going this direction is going to be expanding and simplifying. And ultimately what we're doing is when factoring a trinomial, we look for two numbers that add to the coefficient of the x term, that's here, and multiplies to the constant term, which is this one. So when we look at this question here, we look for two numbers which add to 6 and multiply to 8, and those two numbers would be 2 and 4. So this would be equal to bracket x plus 2 and x plus 4. Just to do a quick review in the next slide, we've got 3 questions. At this point, I'd encourage you to pause and try and do these, and then we'll take them up. Now that you've had a moment to try and do these questions, two numbers which multiply to 12 and add to 7 are 3 and 4. X plus 3. Let's try that again. X plus 3, bracket, x plus 4. 4 plus 3 is 7. 3 times 4 is 12. Two numbers which multiply to give us 24 and add to give us minus 10. They both have to be negative numbers, and what comes to mind would be 4 and 6. So this is equal to x minus 4 and x minus 6. Again, knowing your multiplication tables really helps you out here. When we get to this one, we've got this 2 that's here, and the first thing we want to do is common factor. So each of these numbers divides by 2, so this would be equal to 2 times x squared minus 2x, and 126 divided by 2 is minus 63. So we need two numbers which multiply to minus 63 and add to negative 2, and they have to be, one has to be positive, one has to be negative. And the first thing that comes to mind is 9 and 7. And which one has to have the negative? Well, it has to follow the sign of this. The bigger number has to follow that sign, so it's negative 9. So this will be equal to, the 2 remains, x plus 7 times x minus 9. Okay. If you struggled with those or something wasn't quite right, I'd encourage you to go back and look at the previous lesson. We're moving into complex trinomials, or factoring them specifically. And by the end of this lesson, the goal that we hope to accomplish is to be able to factor expressions that look like this. And at first glance, it might be, okay, well, this is, why don't we just factor to 2? But 2 can't be factored out between 2, 5, and 3. So we're going to see how we can actually do that. So our initial reaction when we look at this question is, I'd like to see if I can common factor, but I can't take out a 2 from 3 and 20. It just doesn't work. So this is a little bit different, and this is exactly why it's called a complex trinomial, because we can't common factor it out. We can't just get x squared and some other numbers over here. So here's one method of doing it. We're going to take this a value, so a is 2, b is minus 3, and c is equal to minus 20, and we're going to multiply it. We're going to multiply the c value by it. So 2 times negative 20 is equal to negative 40. So what we're going to do is we're going to look for two numbers which multiply to minus 40 and add to minus 3. we know that one has to be positive, one has to be negative. Those two numbers, which would be, so multiply to minus 40, adds to minus 3, those numbers are 5 and 8. Which one has a negative? This one does. So how do I know? When I add these together, I get the minus 3. So I can continue with this question. I can use decomposition to show you what's going on. 2x squared. Now, here's the thing. Do I want to put a plus 5 or do I want to put the minus 8 here first? And I'm actually going to put the 8. And there's a reason for that. Minus 8x plus 5x minus 20. The reason why I'm doing that is because when I group these first two terms and these last two terms, I know that 2 can divide the 8, and I know that 5 can be divided out of the 5 and the 20 here. So this would become equal to 2x bracket x minus 4 plus 5 times x minus 4. And so now we can factor out this x minus 4 from it. And that would turn into x minus 4 times 2x plus 5. There's another method that you could use. I mean, you could also go, well, 2 times negative 20 is equal to minus 40. And with practice, you could almost go straight from this step all the way down to the very end. And this is the way I look at it. Is I know that my answer is 5 and minus 8. Those are the two numbers that I'm looking for. And I actually take one of these numbers and I divide it by 2. The only one that can be divided by 2 is this one, so that would turn into minus 4. Turns into minus 4. So I know that in my brackets, there's a 2x. There's an x, and then on the outside, I've got to put in a plus 5 and a minus 4. This is the one that I divided, so it actually has to go in the opposite brackets of the 2. The reason why is because when we expand, this 2 will jump over and multiply that 4 and turn into minus 8. And so that leaves us with plus 5 here. It's not an easy concept to grasp. It is a little bit more challenging, and practice will make perfect. I'd also like to try and show you another method. Here's another way of looking at it. This is technically method number 3, which is the multiples of 20. We've got 1 and 20, 4 and 5, and that's 2 and 10. That's it. Okay, so we can't do anything else with these. Now, if I were to multiply one of these by 2, I also know that I have to have one of these negatives. But if I were to multiply these by 2, which one could I add to get minus 3? If I were to put a negative here on the 4, well, that'd turn into 2 plus, if I put negatives along this side, 2 times that would be negative 2 plus that would be 18. It's not going to be this one. I could do 2 times negative 8 plus a 5, which is equal to minus 3. There's an answer. So if you're really good with your multiplication tables, you could almost jump straight from here to here. And using this method is effective when this number out front is very large, because if you start getting into larger numbers and multiplying this, then you have a lot more possibilities for the a times c value. And so if I had the 4 and 5, the number that I multiplied goes in the opposite brackets. 2x, that's x minus 4, and 2x plus 5. So again, practice will make you much better at this. I've got lots of practice. So on this left side, I'm going to show you how to do these questions. And on the right side, I'm going to pause and ask you guys to do them. The 3 times the 28 is going to be 60 plus 24, which is 84. So I need two numbers which will multiply to 84 and add to 25. And this is where it gets quite large. And let's think about this. We've got 84 would be 4 and 21. It's the first thing that comes to mind. I could also have 2 and 42, but that's getting too large. Just by coming up with some calculations in my head, I've got 4 and 21. The only one that divides by 3 is the 21. So divide this one by 3. So my numbers are 4 and 7. And so I know that this will be equal to 3x, and this plus 4 comes here. The number that I divided goes in the opposite brackets of where the 3 is. So this turns into x plus 7. And that's it. We're done with that one. This is where it starts to get a little bit more tricky. Is when I multiply 5 times the 27, I get 135. If I'm really good, I can try and use the other method, which is, what are the factors of 27? Well, I've got 1 and 27, 3 and 9, and that's it. So if I multiply one of these numbers by 5 and add them together, can I get that 48? Well, 5 times 3 is 15, plus the 9 is going to be 24. That doesn't work. 5 times the 9 is 45, plus the 3 is 48, and we're looking for that magic number of 48. So this isn't it. This is going to be it, with this 9 being times by 5. And technically they're both negative, because this is a positive number. Negative times negative is positive, and a negative plus a negative is going to be negative. So this will be equal to 5x, close the brackets, x. And from here, the one I multiplied by 5 was this minus 9, so it goes in the opposite brackets of the 5. And this minus 3 comes in at the same one. Again, at this point, I'd encourage you to pause and try and do these two questions on your own. Now that you've had a chance to try and do them, I'm going to show you how you could end up solving them. 2 times 24 is 48. You're looking for two numbers which will multiply to minus 48 and add to minus 13. I initially think that it's 6 and 8, but that doesn't work out. Let's see here, what else would work? 2 and 24? No. What about 3 and 16? And one of them has to be negative. Put the negative on the bigger number, because this is a negative number here, and there's my answer, which is the 3 and negative 16. And so I know that I have to divide one of these by 2, divide this one by 2, and so my numbers are 3 and negative 8. This is equal to 2x plus 3, and in the bracket without the 2, I have to put the number that I divided, x minus 8. This one's going to become a very large number. I'm going to use the other method, which is to look at the factors of 18. 1 and 18, 2 and 9, 3 and 6. They both have to be negative in the end, because it's positive on the end, but negative in the middle term. And when I multiply one of these by 7, add them together, I need to get 45. 7 times 9 would be 63. That's way too large. 7 times 18 would be way too large too, and 7 times 1 would be 7. That'd work out to 25. It's not this one. It's going to be not this one. Can't be. It's going to have to be this one. So which one do I have to multiply 7 by? 7 times 3 is 21. 21 plus 6 is 28. That doesn't work. 7 times 6 is 42. 42 plus 3. This is the one that I'm looking for, and I multiply the 6 by the 7. This is equal to 7x, and x on the other side. And the number that I started with and multiplied goes into the other bracket, and the number which I didn't multiply goes into the same bracket as the 7. That concludes looking at this lesson. I must say that this is a very challenging topic to look at. But again, like math is not a spectator sport. You must practice. There's lots of questions here. And I'm also going to supplement this with an additional worksheet. If you're struggling with it, I would recommend that you go back to decomposition method. It's much slower, but we always learn to walk before we run. And I'd recommend that if you need to, use decomposition first, and then when you get more comfortable, start trying to use the other two methods at the end. Again, I make it look easy because I've had lots of practice. Thanks for watching.